goes, you can build a Riviera around the Middle East for a Palestinian, but all you end up with is a terrorist in a seaside resort. Not everyone seems to love this idea. And as far as the idea of relocating the Gazans go, Egypt already said, no, we don't want them. Thank you very much. The EU is nowhere to be seen. The Republic of Ireland, which was very, very pro-Palestinian or perhaps just anti-Israeli, has been fairly quiet. They always said that it's unhelpful. And the socialist government of Spain, they effectively a couple of days ago already issued a very firm no way, Jose. They clearly don't want to be part of it. So what happens around the area? Well, the other Arab states are not showing much love for their Muslim brothers, are they? And they refuse to even get involved. And they clearly have signaled that they don't want Palestinians among their midst. So we wonder, is this just a gimmick? Is just a starting point for some kind of negotiation from the US administration? Or is actually the beginning of the end for the stupid, unachievable idea of the two-state solution?
Welcome to the reality show. We're joined by Anders and Michael. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. Let me come to you, Anders, first of all, for your first reactions on I hesitate to call it a plan, because if I had a plan that was this vague, I wouldn't call it a plan. Maybe you would. What are your initial thoughts on the detail that we have so far, the detail that's missing, and what we can interpret from that we do know?
Well, as you say, we can't really call it a plan, right? And if you would call it a plan, is it a good plan or not? I think I have to give Trump, credit for at least thinking a little bit outside the box here and kind of hopefully getting away from the notion that a two-state solution is required for peace to be achieved in this part of the world, which I, for a long time, have said is absolutely not the right way to go. So he has kind of taken a step towards that, maybe with Gaza. Now, I would love for him to say the same thing about the West Bank and southern Lebanon and southern Syria, perhaps. But yeah, for what it's worth. Now, the second part, though, to make it some kind of US development zone, or what you want to call it, and turn it into a Riviera, I absolutely am against the US getting in if there are private US entities who want to take part in rebuilding, and because they see they can make a profit in some way or another, hey, be my guest. I have no problem with that, but this is not something the American taxpayer should be shouldered with. Now, furthermore, I still think, and I'm still advocating, that this is primarily and unfortunately Israel's problem. And Israel will have, I am still a proponent of occupation for as long as it takes, and then eventually integrate, hopefully, the Palestinians in Gaza into Israeli society. And this is a project of generations, probably, but personally, I can't really see any other solution. We have talked about it before on this show, making comparisons with Japan and Germany after World War II and so on and so forth. And that is still where where my position is on this. So I leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you, Anders. And Michael, in this sort of bold kind of outline plan, this taboo breaking outline plan is so bold and taboo breaking that it's best that you don't tell your own staff before you announce it. You just do it in front of a microphone, right? So it's clearly a surprise to many of the administration themselves that this plan exists. Do you think that is going to last? Do you think that now that so many people know about it, can it survive as a plan, given that people are suddenly mobilizing against it en masse, whether it's within the US or united voices, it would seem, across the world?
Well, let's be very clear to start with. The united voices across the world have mobilized beautifully with the help of Biden and Harris to mobilize against Israel before this all happened. And the reason we're stuck with terrorist groups, not only the Hamas, but also Hezbollah and the Houthis and tons of other groups, is because the world loves to have terrorists beat up on the Jews and hopes that we only lose a few thousand of our citizens every couple of years in the inevitable Muslim Islamic militant groups, which will then be followed by training courses on Islamophobia. And you'll pardon my cynicism, but I think we all should embrace the fact that this plan, and I wouldn't, you're right, it's not a plan, but it's certainly a direction. And it's a complete orthogonal direction to what has been done. And it's an acknowledgement that there's no such thing as a two-state solution when the other side is not a state. Not only is the other side not a state, but it has never had a leader that wanted to be a state. And it has a group of people that frankly are mostly from the Jordan area, and it doesn't really matter where they're from, but they could all go back to Jordan, and they could all go back to Egypt. And there's plenty of room in both those places, and they are not going to be on the Israeli border, assuming that the US and Israel are getting along as well as they appear to be at the moment. So I think this is a fantastic start. I think this is the shakeup. The fact that the world has come out against it, I think is, as Trump would himself say, that's a good indication we should pursue it. When Chuck Schumer is jumping up and down about it and is screaming about it, we should know this is a good idea. And it in fact is. The couple of other points I want to make early on in the show, Saudi Arabia could never do a deal with Israel unless there were a Palestinian state. This is what Saudi Arabia has to say. When you have somebody like Trump over there saying, look, if you want us to put maximal pressure on your arch nemesis, Iran, you've got to do a deal with Israel. And Saudi Arabia knew this was coming. It's going to happen. And as Trump said, they don't need to have a deal. Everybody knows the Palestinians are not going to have a state. The only question is how much chaos and terror are going to exist in the meantime. As far as Egypt and Jordan are concerned, Egypt is, as best as I can read, Egypt is effectively supported by the US. Mm-hmm. If the US pulls out of Egypt, Egypt falls. The government of Egypt is gone. So the US has a lot of pressure on Egypt. And there's already some voluntary exodus being planned here from Gaza, voluntary exodus to Egypt and Jordan being planned. And of course, Israel and the US control now the Rafah crossing, thankfully, as opposed to our friends Egypt, who allowed in all the munitions and so on. I think this is a phenomenal plan. I think the baloney about ethnic cleansing and all this other crap, as if this stuff hasn't happened many, many times. But I think where this all starts from is the notion that when a group of people has a charter to annihilate another group of people, it is clear to anybody with moral clarity that you cannot allow those two people to be juxtaposed. They can't live side by side because one of them living side by side wants to annihilate the other. And if you start with that, this becomes the only viable plan, actually. And I think it's it's phenomenal moral clarity.
Yeah, certainly the fact that the relocation will be on a voluntary basis kind of suggests to me that the plan is not really to clear out Gaza, but it's actually to impose some sort of control over Gaza so that it can be de-radicalized, that Israel can actually act in its own interest and in the interest of the 2 or 3 innocent Gazans who actually will benefit from having a state living in a place where the purpose of the state is not just carrying an all-out war against the neighbors, but it's actually setting up some sort of structure that helps people living there. So to me, it looks like this is just an excuse, a cover, if you like, for to allow Israel to manage and administer Gaza, especially having got rid of UNRWA and all those vicious organizations who were pouring oil on the fire in order to continue the war and radicalize more and more young people. And as you mentioned, this is a radically new idea. it's a massive departure from the two-state solution which has been pushed until now. It's a recognition also by the US administration, by the President of the United States, that you cannot carry on with the status quo. You cannot go back to the old structures, which has led us to this point. So all in all, seems like a positive start. And if it's implemented properly, if they manage to keep any attack under wrap, if they manage to stop the savages attacking Israel during this period when things are being rearranged, can only be good. And it looks to me like lots of places, lots of other states, just look at how quiet the UN is, apart from producing blunt statements. They haven't really said anything much about it. And it looks like they were really caught on the back foot. They've been pushing a two-state solution for 80 years now, and they didn't expect this new, well, nobody did expect this, to be honest.
We have heard from Francesca Albanese, the rapporteur of the UN. She has said in a lovely piece of metaphor, we have moved further to the abyss. I'm tempted to suggest she keeps on going, but
I second that.
Yeah. A couple of other quotes out of some of the reaction to this, the international reaction to this. I've heard from Egypt, from a former foreign minister, who said that this is irresponsible behavior. It's the return of hostilities. It risks the entire region, and it damages the foundations of peace. And Jordan, meanwhile, has said that Jordan has defied the US before. And if it's going to treat its allies like this, who needs their friendship? Lots of firm words in front of a microphone, but as you pointed out, Michael, what's said behind the scenes might be somewhat different. Let me just turn to the UK just before I come back to you, Anders. In the UK, we've heard from Annalise Dodds. Now, Annalise Dodds is a junior Foreign Office minister. She used to be she used to be the shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, but she was demoted from that post. She is essentially a crap politician among a smorgasbord of crap British politicians. But she has said the following. She has said, I think she's been recycling a Foreign Office press release from circa 2005 when she read this out, but this is what she read out. Palestinians must determine the future of Gaza with support from regional states and the wider international community. So she seems to be proposing UNRWA. She seems to be proposing exactly what happened in 2005 and believing that this time round, the Palestinians would be able to rebuild a perfectly working Gaza that didn't have tunnels underground, rockets firing off everywhere, and draining the aid of the international community in order to use it for terrorism. So, Anders, some of these voices from abroad, we're getting a flavour of what people think, but of course there is that public face and that private view. What's said in diplomatic circles is often what's said behind the camera, not in front of it. So, how can we really interpret what chance any of this stands, given that we aren't behind the camera?
Well, first, I think it's a correct reaction to say that, when all of these people are condemning it in one way or another, we must be doing something right. I think it was Michael who said that. So I don't put too much emphasis on that. I mean, it's so totally expected. I mean, we could probably have sitting down and written down these comments before they were said and gotten pretty close to what they would have said. So that doesn't surprise me at all. But again, back to the fact whether this is a plan or not, I think right now we're kind of in limbo. We're waiting, and your guess is as good as mine where this will go next. I saw that Netanyahu had kind of endorsed it. I thought this was a good idea. So I don't know what kind of support is in Israel for this. I actually haven't seen much of a reaction. It could be that I'm not reading the right news sources, but do we see the same political polarization in Israel on this latest issue as we have seen all along since the outbreak of the war? So if Michael or anybody else has some insights in that, it would be interesting to hear.
Michael?
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I read pretty carefully, and I probably 10 times a day, 3 or 4 of the major Israeli online news to try to get a flavor, and a whole bunch of other editorial stuff. Frankly, I think the center left, which is center by any other country's standards in Israel, is just shocked. The center left in Israel has supported a two-state solution with no ability to enunciate where the other state was. It's not Yasser Arafat. It wasn't going to be the PLO. And it isn't anything from the PLO, and it certainly wasn't going to be Hamas, but mysteriously some government was going to emerge from the poorly educated, terrorist-laden people of Gaza who elected Hamas. They were going to somehow elect a reasonable government that was going to acknowledge Israel's right to exist, and that was going to be the state. And I've had many arguments with many left-center people in Israel and centrist people in Israel about this, and how foolish. I told them, I think you're absolutely naive and you can't give me an answer. And you haven't been able to, because there is no answer, because these people have no interest in making a properly functioning country. And by the way, I challenged them to tell me how many properly functioning Islamist countries there are in the world. Properly functioning, not propped up, not dictatorships, not theocracies, blah, blah, blah. And of course, there aren't any. I mean, there are countries that have tried to behave like the United Arab Emirates, and countries that pretend and play both sides and are heinous, like Qatar. And of course, Saudi Arabia is completely two-sided in everything it does. And those are the countries that we have to show and would lead this. So I think the left center is confused. They know Trump is their friend. They have to think about it. They're also very thoughtful people. I mean, in general, these tend to be the more university educated. I'm saying in general, this is a stereotype, of course, but it's true. It's majority of people on the left, and then the right. I think the right side is pretty excited about it. I think that the army has already, they press release, and again, we don't know what's really happening, but they press release that they've been drawing up plans now to allow for the voluntary. By the way, when I said voluntary exit, I didn't mean that all the people in Gaza would leave voluntarily. I meant that there's already plans being drawn up, according to the news here in Israel, for allowing or facilitating the voluntary exit of people from Gaza to other places. And I don't think Trump I do agree with you that this is a harbinger of, the argument Trump is using right now is that Gaza, even the buildings that are still intact, are mostly going to be wired and full of munitions and unsafe, and that it's unfair and inhumanitarian to make people live there and crowd in there during the 10 years it's going to take to reconstruct the rest of it. And how could you possibly do that? You're going to have to level the entire country. And frankly, there's so many improvised explosive devices and so on that you really need to probably bomb, or at least completely clear out the country with the best technology now, robotic and so on, to find all the bombs in the country, and get those cleared out. And by the way, there's still bombs in the Syrian Golan Heights, and there's areas of Israel that you're still not allowed to go because there are still bombs buried there. So if people think I'm making this up, have a trip to northern Israel and go visit some of the wired off areas. Please don't walk into the areas, because there are bombs there, and there are big signs in lots of languages saying, don't go here, you may be blown up. And that's the way it's done in this part of the world. So I think that this is a plan to clean it out. And I completely agree with Anders. I can't see Trump, who's trying to save the US government money. And he really is. I mean, the onslaught that's going on inside of America right now to save money is remarkable and highly welcome, in my opinion. I think he would do exactly what you said. I think there's amazing development. Remember, this area is some of the nicest beach area in the entire Mediterranean. Really, the beaches there were before Hamas took over, were actually nicer than the finest beaches we have in the rest of Israel. It's all the Mediterranean, of course, but it is a gorgeous area. And the beaches just north of Gaza in Ashkelon and Ashdod are much nicer than the beaches that are a little bit further north in Tel Aviv and so on. So that makes sense. What it'll turn into, who knows? But I think this is a great direction. I think the right side of Israel and the right center are excited. I think the left is still trying to figure it out and reevaluate themselves. And I do think it's helpful for people to enunciate. I think this was as I said, remarkable moral clarity to state that if someone truly wants to murder and annihilate you, that you can't live side by side with them. It just can't happen anymore. And the Gazans have demonstrated over the last, certainly since 2005, when Gaza, when Israel left Gaza, and even before that, they only can create terror and kill Israelis.
So may I ask a follow-up question with respect to the voluntary portion of this? What would that mean? Assuming there are people that want to leave, and I'm sure there are people who want to leave, would they have anywhere to go? I mean, Egypt doesn't want them, Jordan doesn't want them. Would they all end up in the West Bank, which would not?
No. I don't know. Yeah. I think I don't know the details. My impression is they would go through the Rafah crossing to Egypt, and then some of them would go to Jordan and some would go to Egypt. But what Trump has said is that there would be stipends for them, which would be at the American taxpayers' expense, probably less money than we would have to give Israel to replenish its Iron Dome system, for example. Don't forget, it's $50,000 every time we send up an Iron Dome to block one of the Hamas pieces of crap missiles, because we have to send up two of ours to block theirs. Theirs cost $1 or $2. Ours cost 50,000 because they're high technology. Anyway, but there would be, and the average income in Egypt is somewhere around 5,000 US a year. So you could move a lot of people out, and it would come with some stipends. And it would also come on the other side for what they've said is that Egypt would be told that you're going to have your foreign aid cut from the US substantially if you don't play ball. It is no money. You could take 1 million people for $5 billion. You could take 1 million people into Egypt for $5 billion a year if you paid them at the same level that the Egyptians are paid. And 5 billion may sound like a big number, but it's nothing compared to the numbers that are spent in fighting and war and so on, and defense for this to go on. So that's the plan. I think Jordan is also, of course, we hear what they're saying publicly, but it makes no sense. Also, and don't forget, folks, there's tons of desert space in these areas. And Israel was the same desert. It's the same land. Israel just happened to irrigate it. Oh, by the way, and Jordan and Egypt didn't. But this technology could be moved in pretty quickly, it turns out. And Israel has the best desalination for fresh water in the world. California would benefit largely from that in the U.S. And it wouldn't be that tough. Trump's point is it's going to take 5 to 10 years to rebuild Gaza. What are we going to do with these people? And I think you could do something with them. There are parts of Gaza that are not bombed, but I think it's a great explanation for why it makes sense to move into a place that hasn't been bombed out and isn't full of bombs and booby traps and so on.
Yeah, you could also argue that, to be honest, they should be involved in the rebuilding of Gaza. They should,
They
pay.
should.
They literally should pay for the devastation that they caused.
Yeah. But they don't have money. It's their leaders that have money.
Well, they can work.
And Qatar, yeah, they should work. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They should rebuild. They should help to build these places. Refugee camps should be put up, and then they should make the refugee camps into freestanding villages. I mean, it's been done. People do this after we have climate problems or natural disasters. People do rebuild places. Yeah. And one more comment, sorry to go on, but the other thing I found so amusing about the comments is you can't move 1.8 million people out of an area. Well, I got news for you folks. Trump is moving 1 million plus illegal immigrants from the United States, which is a much bigger space. They are moving them. They're after them. They've already rounded up over 10,000 in 2 weeks. These are the criminals. The United States is going to go back to actually following the laws that it has on the books. All my point is that we're able to do that in a much bigger country. Of course, you can help these people get to a place, set up refugee camps, and actually ensure that those refugee camps don't stay as refugee camps, but become hopefully villages where people can start to take care of themselves. You're absolutely right. It cannot continue to be this absurd charitable baloney that it has become.
Which is also something where you would have to put pressure on Jordan, right? Because if I understand it correctly, you have millions of Palestinians who have lived in refugee camps since 1948.
Yeah, in Jordan, that's correct. And a lot of the Jordanians apparently are Palestinian if you go back and look at their DNA. And I don't know what the exact numbers are, but this whole Palestinian mystique of who they are, it was all same group of people that were basically in the Jordan area. As and Judea and Samaria are part of Jordan, and the whole West Bank area it's the West Bank of the Jordan River, right? That's what the West Bank means. It's short for the West Bank of Jordan River, which is kind of where we used to separate between Jordan and Israel.
Yeah, and just to avoid people spitting their teeth out, Palestine is not ethnicity. We're talking about the Arab that used to live in the area. We all understand that Palestine is just a political denomination that people want really to destroy Israel. If you are against Israel, you call yourself a Palestinian, and that's the shortcut to call yourself a genocidal maniac, really. You were talking about moving Gazans into Egypt. It is not a big deal. Of course, Trump is moving the immigrant. However, the immigrant he is moving are not bred to cause genocide, so they're a bit easier to deal with. And when you have the Palestinians moving out of Gaza, the Gazans moving out into Egypt, there must be also the infrastructure in place to make sure they don't start digging tunnels and provide weapons as they've done in the past to Hamas. So that's a really challenging task to embark in. And that's why Israel must have an iron fist, tight control on the whole area, on the whole Gaza Strip, to make sure this kind of things don't occur. Because there's no point getting rid of the Gazans and just let them arm Hamas from abroad.
Yeah.
What kind of staggers me is the lack of comment coming from the rest of the G7. We know that most of the European countries, Germany, France, are worried about not upsetting Trump too much because he's threatening them with tariffs. So they are probably a bit taken aback. But we heard from the usual suspects, China and Russia, and of course Iran. Iran is the most laughable statement that we heard, I think, in the last 2 days about, we don't want to build nuclear weapon. There is a fatwa against creating nuclear weapons. It's like, well, first of all, if you believe Iran, then you're lost. I don't even want to talk to you. But China and Russia, of course, they side on the Hamas side, and they all play safe, saying, "Oh yeah, this is a difficult situation. You risk destabilizing the area." And of course, what do you expect from dictatorships like that? They clearly position themselves on the side of Hamas during the conflict. They were never in favor of helping Israel. So, we don't expect any better from them, really.
I think when I look at some of the statements that Trump has made and some of the phrases used within various different press conferences and speeches and stuff, obviously the normal rules of the precision of diplomatic language don't exactly apply when we're talking about And if you take the difference just between the short phrase "take over" the Gaza Strip or have the Gaza Strip turned over to the US by Israel, there's a gulf of difference between that. Whether Israel chooses to give America some form of oversight in terms of the way in which it's built, but also there's the fact that is there an opportunity here for lots of people across the world, including those Arab states that have built their own skyscrapers in different parts of their various countries, including Dubai, etc., to actually invest in Gaza and have essentially a slice of the pie in terms of developing this Riviera of the Middle East? Is there an opportunity for them to have a stake in it to such an extent that they would want it to work as much as the West would want it to work, or as much as at least the US and Israel would want it to work. I can't really lump them all together with the West, sadly. Because I think that's one of the questions that I think is interesting to contemplate. Anders, what do you think?
Oh, I think absolutely. And I think it can be made a lot better because, you know, these Persian Gulf republics, or not republics, but theocracies, I guess they are. I mean, yeah, they have pumped a lot of their oil money into their infrastructure and to attract people from all over the world. So, and that's despite the lack of political freedom that they have. If you would put something in place in Gaza, where, I mean, number one is to have a system of property rights, and I don't know what kind of property rights they have in Gaza for right now, or if at all. But, you know, if you establish the property rights and have objective laws enforcing those property rights, and, you know, all the stuff that we associate with a proper capitalist society, there is no reason why this can't turn into new Hong Kong within a few decades, you know. Absolutely not. I mean, we're talking people here, and people have ideas, and if people are free to execute on those ideas, the sky is the limit.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, your thoughts on this, and whether this is actually the moment when the Arab nations can stop living on the option of giving blank out as their version of the plan for Gaza, other than trotting out the phrase two-state solution. Can they actually be involved in some form of positive suggestion that doesn't involve, you know, trying to pretend that doing the same thing again is going to get a different result?
Yeah, look, I think Trump has called them on it. I think he's called the whole world on it. They've used the term in 75 years. We tried one thing and it has completely failed. It just hasn't not worked. It's failed. It's been miserable. And it can't be allowed to do that again. I also think that what we're seeing now, and it's early in Trump's time, and I'm hopeful that this will continue to remain what seems to me to be a very you know, Trump said, I want to make this the golden age of America, I don't think he meant it to be at the exclusion of everybody else. He was trying to say, I want this to be the golden age, effectively, of the West, that people who want to get on board and get with us. And I don't think he really wants to fight wars. I think he's absolutely happy to push a button and have the mother of all bombs blow up bad people. I don't think he has any compunction about that at all. I think he's good with that, which is important because, you know, walk softly and carry a big stick, as Churchill used to say. But I think what he really wants to do is bring people along for the ride and some success and human progress. And I don't mean to sound ridiculous, but as you guys have said on this show a lot, and Anders brings it up beautifully, I think, you know, the occupation of Japan for 10 years after World War II, converting a Shinto government with suicide bombers. Everyone forgets Japan had suicide bombers. The Islamic militants didn't figure that out recently. Japan was flying airplanes into mostly American ships, but Allied ships. Now, mostly they were doing it into ships and military structures, not into civilians. So the Arabs did one better by killing innocent civilians. But we changed a notion of Shintoism and dying for the emperor and this kind of blind faith in authority into one of the most flourishing Western-based democracies, obviously in the Far East, around. And Germany went from the Hitler all the way 180 degrees back to one of the best democracies, Angela Merkel notwithstanding, you know, of Western Europe. So I think what I'm getting to is that I think the U.S. has a lot of weight to throw around, and it can do it in a good way. And I'm very hopeful. We'll see. I'm optimistic, though, that Trump wants to leave this world. He does want to he wants to be remembered as the best president. The guy's an egoist. You know, he loves himself. But I think unlike his first term, I think this second term, he actually realizes he better do something. Because having the soap opera that we had in his first term, which I like some of the stuff he did, but I don't think he wants that. I think he does want to make the world a better place. And I think he sees you team up with a guy like Elon Musk because you want to make the world better and you want to innovate. It's actually a shocking thing. The people he put around him really are a great mix of, more classical sort of conservative-ish, but mixed with some real innovation. And it's a great thing. And I think this innovative approach, we all know there's only one way to get out of this, and that's to get rid of this horrible, horrible philosophy and and get the people into these other countries, and clear out Gaza so that Israel's protected, and hopefully we can build something there. And maybe the Gazans can return, maybe not. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I think it would be far better to spend the money on new housing without tunnels in some other part of other state than it is to try to rehabilitate Gaza for the people that are living there, while we're giving money to Israel all the time to protect themselves.
Yeah, and we have to remember that the Gazans right now are still holding hostages taken on October 7th. So we're not talking hypothetically about a bunch of people who love life and all this kind of stuff. These people are just murderers, really. They shown more than once. And there was a report, I think, today or yesterday, that they showed that at least 7,000 Gazans took part to the 7 atrocities. So this is a widespread cultural event. It's not a bunch of wackos within the Gazan society. This is the way they live. That's literally culture. Thank you, Apollo Zeus, for donating a Ayn Rand Center UK membership.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. I think one elephant in the room that I've not heard mentioned in the course of a lot of the discussion about this is the big thing that Arab states, Arab nations have struggled to do until now, largely, which is to recognize the legitimacy of the Jewish state in the first place. How can we have that as part of the solution here, rather than only talking about this stretch of land that is Gaza? Michael, your thoughts on that one first.
Yeah, so one thing I did want to interject, and I forgot to earlier real quick, is remember that there used to be I believe it's close to 1 million Gazans, maybe it's 500,000, but it's a large number relative to their population of 1.8-ish million, who were employed in Israel. Prior to October 7th, people had work permits to cross the border and come into Israel and work. And frankly, those jobs were considered some of the best jobs in all of Gaza because, frankly, they were, quote, real jobs, not just building tunnels for terrorists. And they worked in Israel. And I can tell you there is a shortage of labor in Israel for a lot of the stuff that immigrants tend to do in countries. But there is a shortage here because we don't have them anymore and they're not allowed. There is no crossing of any border right now. So I'd mentioned that you asked me why people would want to leave. They want to leave because they have no work. And they certainly have no work when most of their buildings are trashed. So the question you were asking is, will the Arab states recognize Israel? Well, we have a great deal in the Abraham Accords with people who, not happily, but begrudgingly, but economically, actually very happily, work. Not only do they recognize Israel, but they trade with Israel. And I can tell you, my wife works in the venture industry in Israel. There are a lot of approaches from Bahraini and Emirates investors that want to invest in funds like hers and others. There's a lot of interest in Israeli innovation across all the countries that are part of the Abraham Accords. Not to mention, of course, that there are flights directly into these countries from Israel. And unlike the Western European and American airlines, which have all stopped flying to Israel, ostensibly because of safety, which is complete and utter crap for those who want to know, because El Al Airlines has flown the same number of flights since the beginning of the war, and there have been zero problems, zero. And frankly, most of the Arab countries, interestingly, that have worked with us, the Emirates Airways, for example, their sub company, they have never stopped flights as far as I'm aware. Maybe 1 or 2 days during a Hezbollah blow up, but they recognize Israel. I'm sure not happy about it, but I think they all know in 20 years that the next generation comes in, if they normalize relationships with Israel, which they have done, this will no longer be on the major topic of recognizing Israel. They understand that Israel is going to stay here, and we are. There's no question this country will stay here, even if it has to continue to fight wars. It'll still be here.
Mm. I have something that's in my head. I wonder. You talked about the Abraham Accords. How can you and I'll ask this question to you later to you, Anders, as well. But Michael, first, how do you manage to have this kind of accords and at the same time, as Ayn Rand say, not give the sanction to the evil that these countries represent? Do you think Israel can actually play do this? Do you think that Israel can actually have dealings with states that are all but moral and be able to get some value out of it without compromising its own principles?
Yeah, look, I think where objectivism is a philosophy for life and reality is the basis of objectivism, I love it. One thing I don't agree completely with Ayn Rand is that the reality is the vast majority of countries in this world are bad. They're net bad. All countries have screw-ups and all countries have major imperfections. But as we see from the United Nations, the vast majority of the countries are evil or tending to evil and oppressive, and they're not interested in human flourishing, and they're not interested in a government by the people for the people. It's a government of the people by the leaders who oppress the people. And I don't think you can exist in this world with a purist view. I don't like to compromise my own principles, but we all know we have employees and we all have people that we work with that are just not up to par, and we swallow hard and we have to deal with it. We have dealt with the United Arab Emirates really well. I mean, we have a good relationship with them now. I think it's far better than the relationships even we have with Egypt and Jordan, because I think the Egyptian one is broken and was completely predicated on a lie that they were going to protect the border with Gaza, and they didn't. And they're not that advanced a country, but I think you can do it. I think you always have to remember, though, that these people are not necessarily your friend, but you can still do business with people that are not your friend, and I think you have to do that.
Yeah, and that's probably the difference. You don't have to legitimize the governments, as you can still deal with them, but without necessarily
Exactly.
Give them a sanction the way they are. Anders, what do you think about this? Do you think we can deal with these evil states without compromise our principles?
Well, I think you have to make a differentiate between evil and bad. I mean, this comes on a spectrum, right? But as long as a country is not an immediate threat to you, whether that is to the US or in this case Israel, and that they take action on those threats, to Michael's point, I mean, you can still do business with them. I mean, we have in this country, the debate has been going on for the longest time, when and when not you do business with China. I mean, so while it was a communist country, there were people who said that we should absolutely not do it. I mean, it's still a communist country, but when it was more totalitarian. And then they started to open up, and there were great debates. Okay, can we buy this stuff? And then it seems like most people just threw up their hands, because you basically can't get around without buying Chinese stuff these days. So I don't think that is a problem. But back to the question about a foreign policy and the Abraham Accords, I don't know the details of the accord, but I'm questioning, apart from military alliances, which there is obviously a case to be made for, I don't know to what extent these accords or agreements, I mean, we have free trade agreements with countries, but my basic position when it comes to everything foreign policy related is that the best foreign policy is to lead by example at home and really don't give a damn about what people are doing in other countries. So for instance, if you look at the history of the United States, after the revolution in the 19th century, there were a lot of countries who were inspired by and tried to copy what we had done in this country. Now, most of them were unfortunately not that successful, but Switzerland probably still stands out as the one successful example. And if you take care of business at home, and what I mean by that here, if you take the US, if you promote capitalism, as Ayn Rand taught us to do, and basically work towards getting government out of everything that it shouldn't be involved in, you would see economic growth take off like you've never seen before. People talk about 6% as being a vision. I would say that it would be hard not to grow by 10% per year in a free society. And whatever enemies and detractors you have abroad in a situation like that, when they see what you achieve, their leaders may not appreciate it, but you bet that the people are taking notice. And over time, there will be pressure on those leaders to adopt some of the policies that we're doing here in the United States, right? And by doing that, you develop friends around the world because people are focusing on commerce and not on petty grievances that they have with one another. And similarly, I think, I mean, the same applies to Israel. I think if Israel really focuses on enhancing the freedom, and God knows that there is a lot that can be improved upon in Israel because it's a welfare state, right, with the socialist background. But if Israel would adopt more free market policies, more policies that protected individual rights, it would become even more a magnet for resources from abroad, and growth would take off even more than what we see today. And I think the neighboring countries around, the people of those countries, would start to take notice and put pressure on their people. And eventually, you know, those religious or other differences that we see today would start to dissipate. I mean, we're talking about, it's a long-term perspective here, but I think that you need to have that in mind too when you're talking about these agreements that were so to summarize, I think things like the Abraham Accord in a historical perspective, it will be a blip on the screen of human progress and the march towards a capitalist world.
Yeah. And you're talking, Anders, there about evil being on a spectrum and bad being on a spectrum. And of course, at the far end of that evil spectrum, we have Iran. And when we're talking about this carrot and stick approach, obviously the stick is what applies to Iran. And I noticed that this maximum pressure campaign, as it's called, that Trump is exercising for Iran to try and stifle off and sanction their oil revenue, has included sanctioning certain individuals from China, India, and the UAE, who have already been trying to been caught, essentially, trying to buying Iranian oil. So
and Iran, I think, is a country where the current regime, I'm not making I mean, it's the regime. We're not talking about the Iranian population here. I think that's important to differentiate. It's an evil regime, you know, and there I would actually be in favor for the US supporting Israel by any means to basically eliminate the threat militarily and economically. And I think Iran has a glorious future as a secular state if the people is just allowed to make it happen.
But does any of this Gaza plan stand any chance of working while the Ayatollah is still there, while the Iranian regime is still suppressing its own people? Does the whole Middle East not need to see Iran toppled before any of this actually stands a chance? Is that not one key part of the puzzle here?
Well, I tend to think it is, but I think we have seen over the last few months that their influence has been significantly removed. But I think in many ways it would be the easiest way of removing all these petty organizations that are surrounding Israel today once and for all, including the Houthis in Yemen. They are 1,000 miles away, but still, I mean, if you would take care of Iran, you would take care of most of the rest as well. Now, a question I have, though, and that I haven't seen too much debate on, you know, sometimes we're afraid of when we do something, you never know what can of worms you open up, right? So if we would take care of Iran, you know, and this is where I'm not really familiar with the dynamics in the region, but would that make Saudi Arabia and Pakistan see an opportunity being the big sunny countries in that region of the world? You know, so are we kind of enabling future conflicts here between Muslim states? That may not be a big deal for us, but you know, I think there are other dynamics in the region that we may not necessarily think about too much. That shouldn't prevent us from taking care of Iran. I think we should, and hopefully there are some sound foreign policy people out there who are keeping an eye on this and you know what the chances and risks are here. Because I don't think just taking out Iran would turn the region to a peaceful paradise or something. There are a lot of internal or other dynamics going on there that we may not necessarily be aware of.
Yeah, and I think that Iran is very well aware that it's not facing the Democrats anymore. He's probably taking note. Just the other day.
And you know, just as much as we focus on Iran's ambitions to spread Shia Islam around the world and take down Israel, and the big Satan comes next, I think they're also very, very afraid of their own neighbors should they be decimated militarily. I mean, they still have the Iran-Iraq war in relatively fresh memory, you know, that killed millions of people. And they have some militarily pretty powerful neighbors, actually.
Yeah. And as I was saying, like as ISIS found out a few days ago in Somalia, you're not dealing with Biden right now. So if you step out of line, you're going to get you know, a few US-made bombs on your head, which is the way it should be, really. So it's going to be interesting to see what Iran does, because I'm pretty sure that Trump would take the Islamic out of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So that would be a good thing, to be honest. But
absolutely.
Michael, closing comments, and where can people find more about you?
Sure. I just would say with Iran, it's very interesting to watch them now. I doubt very much that the Tehran anti-aircraft batteries have been repaired yet. It wasn't clear that Russia was going to be able to repopulate them anyway, because it wasn't clear that Russia actually had any available to send to Iran or sell to Iran. And my understanding was these were mostly Russian technology. Most of it was Russian technology. The Israelis took it out in one airstrike, and I've said this, you know, I reminded folks many times on this show. As far as I can tell, and I don't know, but it seems to me that Iran is relatively naked. Tehran is relatively naked, including the oil fields in the area and the nuclear sites in the area, ones that we all as a public know about, as well as the ones that Israel and America and other people know about secretly. They also know that the U.S. has the Moab bomb, which I guess is a 30,000-pound bomb or something, as opposed to the 2,000-pound bombs, and that those deep-seated nuclear sites could actually be penetrated with these bombs and would be destroyed. And I think they understand, as Trump already said to them, if you assassinate me, I have left instructions for the U.S. military to destroy you, completely destroy you, which was we all believe that. I'm sure he would do that, and I'm sure the U.S. would do that. As you said, they are dealing with a very different sheriff in town now, one that's not afraid to throw their weight around, one that has moral clarity about who's right and who is wrong. And I think now with the sanctions just being signed as of a day ago or so, enforcement will come. I think there's probably going to be more U.S. warships making sure that Iranian oil tankers cannot move, that people don't violate these sanctions. You guys already pointed out that even people in the UAE, which is supposed to be friendly with the U.S., have been nailed, and they will be. I think if he enforces all this, and it's really Iran's only lifeline, it's going to be very difficult for Iran to continue to do much of anything. And then I would also say, look at the Houthis. I mean, I don't think we've heard a peep out of them, except some vague threats, which they always do, since Trump took office, because I think they are aware that this isn't going to be we intercepted 5 of your drones, the way Biden was clapping about, like, catching a ball in right field. It's a U.S. baseball analogy, as opposed to your job is to take the baseball and absolutely kill the batter. I mean, that's the job. But no, he was too busy letting the guy hit the ball and then you catch it. So I think we're in a very different world right now. And, the best defense is always a good offense. And I think if this is going to be maximal suppression of Iran through economic suppression with military enforcement, because you need it. You can't have Iranian tankers, and foreign tankers that have picked up oil in Iran going back, and you got to shut down their money feeds as well, which I'm sure we can do from the U.S. It's going to be a very different world that we're walking into, and I think it's going to be a much, much safer world and a much better world. Michael Kaufman, 2Fs, and Kaufman, LinkedIn is the best place for me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. And talking of sanctions, I noticed the ICC is being sanctioned by Trump with his new executive order to restrict visas and financial restrictions on those who try and aid and abet the punishment of Israel and the US through this phony court. We do have a couple of super chats that just came in, one of which includes a question, which I would just like to throw to you, Michael, first, just because of your knowledge of the area. Gigi Ryder has given us a super chat that says, I heard a suggestion that Israel should export hateful Muslims to Syria and also import Druze Arabs from Syria who want to be Israelis. Do you have any thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, look, I don't have a lot of thoughts. I will tell you, one thing you got to keep in mind is that the Arab population in Israel, I think, is 20% right now, and they do have voting rights, despite what the apartheid mongers like to say, et cetera. They don't have complete citizen rights. They're not allowed to fly planes in the military. That's one of the things that you hear everyone really complain about. They're allowed to be soldiers, and they are, but they're not allowed to fly planes yet because... But that's reserved for the Israeli citizens. But we have 20% Arab. So I don't know if bringing in another 20% Arabs, which is what you would effectively do by bringing in a million, 1.8 or 2 million people, or a lot more Arab people. In Druze, I don't know if there's any restriction on their military service. There's plenty of Druze that are in the IDF, and they have full voting rights, et cetera. They have the same rights that Israeli Jewish people have. So I don't know if there would be mass migration here, but Israel, first of all, if you want to come here, and if you're Jewish, you certainly can come to Israel, period. If you're not Jewish and you show if you're married to a Jewish person, you can come here. If you have a kid with a Jewish person, you can come here automatically. I'm not saying you don't have to actually do anything. You just have to let the government know that that's who you are. I don't know what percentage this country would be willing to let in right now, just because of the demographic shifts. But principally, we actually love the Druze. They love us. Us being the Jewish people in Israel, we get on really well, and I think it would be welcome. We have a ton of Ethiopian Jews here in Israel, people that left Ethiopia to come here.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to Jonathan Honig for your super chat as well. We appreciate your support of this channel. Thank you very much. And Anders, any remarks to close out what we've been discussing in this session today?
No, not really. You can find me at andersingemarsson.substack.com, and my book, Think Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right, is available on Amazon.
Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We're really looking forward to the Trump Tower Gaza Strip Club coming in the future.
And
you guys can be platinum members.
Yeah. And of course, we'll keep you posted as information comes in across all of the shows on this channel. And of course, that will mean the Daily Objective and the reality show again on this channel tomorrow. So join us for that. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you to our super chatters. And we'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.